And at that point in the investigation, had you talked to Michelle Shelley Smith about a conversation she had with Alex Murdaugh and the amount of time that he said he was there?
Yes, she had been interviewed by that time. Again, there were so many agents going out and doing interviews and reporting back to me. But she stated that it was somewhere around 20 minutes. I don't have her report. I don't remember exactly what was said, but I know in our first interview, he had stated that it was around, he had spent about 20 minutes, 20, 30 minutes with his mother.
And did your investigation reveal inconsistencies regarding what Mr. Murdaugh had told you?
Yes, I did.
And was that significant to you in your investigation?
It was, because it wasn't one inconsistency. It was several inconsistencies over a period of time that were repeated.
Now, you asked him about a list of guns several times in these interviews. Did you ever get a list of guns from Alex Murdaugh?
I have not.
Between June 7th, 2021 and August 11th, 2021, this interview, how many times did he call you asking about the investigation?
We spoke approximately 5 or 6 times.
What were the inconsistencies that you stood out in your mind?
The times, for one, from the first interview with where he went to his mother's, refer back to my notes.
Time at his mother's, is it fair just to say that?
So when the first interview in June, he stated that it was at his mother's for approximately, first off, he stated for a little while. And then the second interview on June the 10th, it changed to, sorry, give me just a second. About 25 or 30 minutes. And then the third interview, it was 45 minutes to an hour. And then some other inconsistencies is how much time he spent with Paul riding around. The first time it was 45 minutes to an hour. The next time he talked about riding on the farm anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then the inconsistencies, I had the information from Rogan Gibson that he heard Alec. He believed he heard Alec in the background. And on the 3 interviews, Alec never indicated that he was at the kennels, that he was at the house, either taking a nap, playing on his phone, or watching TV. And this was after dinner.
Was he ever inconsistent about whether or not he went down to the kennel after supper that last?
Yes.
Did he ever say he did go down there after dinner?
He never told me he went down there after dinner.
Never told you that.
He told me he took a nap and then he was at the house after dinner. He knew Maggie went to the kennels. At first, he wasn't sure where Paul went, but then he realized that Paul must have gone to the kennels because that's where he found him. But then he stayed at the house, took a nap.
Now, there's been some discussion, and I think your testimony was he brought it up on the 911 case about the boat case.
Yes, sir.
And that happened in what year?
February of 2019.
2019. And was that case null prosequi, dismissed by the Attorney General's office in the after Paul's death? Can you prosecute a dead man?
No, sir, you cannot. And it's my understanding that the Attorney General's office null pros Paul's case in August of 2021.
So that case criminally, like we're in a criminal courtroom, was over.
Yes, sir.
At some point in 2021, in the fall, did a financial investigation begin involving Alex Murdaugh?
Yes, sir.
Would it be fair to say that overlapped with this investigation?
It did.
Would it be fair to say those investigations fed off each other?
They did. From the information that I was learning from that investigation into the finances, it gave me additional people to consider, to look at, and consider even to look at Mr. Murdaugh as, a reason why or why not.
Were there individuals in the financial investigation that you also interviewed in reference to this investigation?
I did.
Did some of that information you learned from interviews or grand jury testimony?
Yes, I did.
Did you then follow up on some of that information?
Yes, I did.
And from August, September of 21 to the summer of 22, were you, as a member of the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, working exclusively or primarily on this case?
That's correct.
And were search warrants still out there you were waiting?
Yes, sir. There's a multitude of search warrants.
And let's talk just a moment, and I'm about through about the phones if we could.
Okay.
You, law enforcement, got Maggie Murdaugh's phone when? I mean, when did you actually take physical custody of it?
Maggie Murdaugh's phone was recovered on June 8th, 2021 on the side of Moselle Road.
And what, were you able to do you, law enforcement, you know what I'm talking about, able to get how much information did you get from Maggie's phone in this investigation?
The family gave us, I believe it actually came from Alec or either Buster, but we got access to her phone via her password. So we were able to do a full extraction from her phone.
Full extraction.
Yes, sir.
And some of that is included in the timeline that's already been entered. It's going to be entered by Mr. Waters in a little bit, right?
Yes, sir.
Full extraction.
Full extraction.
Now, how about Alex's phone? Was it initially taken on June 7th or June 8th?
It was not taken on June 7th or June 8th. We got an extraction on June 10th when we met for our second interview. But that was just a logical extraction, not a full extraction.
Which was, I don't really understand, but that's the surface, right?
That's just the surface.
Off the top. All right. Did you ever get that phone back?
In September, yes, sir.
September. And at that point, was further information attempted to be gathered from Alex Murdaugh's phone?
Yes, sir.
And how successful was that?
Being the time difference between June and September, a lot of the earlier on information had been overwritten. It's just the way the computers work. You have to clear out memory to make room for new memory. So some information had been not erased, but cached out. So we were able to gain some information from the logical in June and compare it to the full extraction that we got in September.
And were you able to determine what had been erased also?
There were some phone calls that had been erased, yes.
Now let's talk about Paul's phone. And to go back in the interview just very briefly on Paul's phone, I'm sorry, Judge, 1 second, I apologize. You would ask him when he turned Paul over and his cell phone popped out. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And what's his answer just a little while ago? I don't know. I mean, when I went up to him, the phone came out, but I don't remember having any intentions of doing anything with the phone.
Well, the first interview, he stated that the phone popped out and that he picked it up and thought about doing something with it, thought better of it and put it back down.
In this interview, he said it came out, right?
Yes.
Now, Paul's phone, did y'all attempt to do, so you had it from June 7th until today?
Yes.
Okay. Were you able to do a full extraction on Paul's phone?
We were able to finally do a full extraction in March of 2022.
Okay, March of 2022.
Yes, sir.
What, if any, information came as a result of that extraction or more to?
The kennel video. That
we've
showed,
all-
that we've all seen, yes. The kennel video where Paul is videotaping the chocolate lab, and you can hear Maggie and Paul and Alec in there.
And
that video is timestamped at 8:44.
Say it again?
8:44 p.m.
And until that day, what day was it? Do you know? Well, if you don't, that's fine. But it came out.
I believe I got the information on April 8th of 2022.
Until that day, and it was extracted. To your knowledge, did anybody else in the world know that was on there except Paul?
Nobody, to my knowledge.
And up until this past, was information in this investigation gathered up through last weekend?
Yes, it is.
What was that?
The General Motors information from Alex's 2021 Suburban.
So SLED from June 7th in combination with the locals, the feds have been investigating this case nonstop.
That is correct.
Where is it? I believe there's a housekeeping matter that Paul's shoes moving into evidence 103. I don't believe there's an objection to that. Did they talk about that? Objection. Thank you, gentlemen. 36 without objection.
Submitted. Any further questions?
Yes, sir. I don't believe I asked you this, but for the couple of questions. Were there any other credible leads that you've investigated that led you to anybody else beside Alex Murdaugh?
Not credible, no, sir.
Did you follow up with every lead that came in on this case, social media or otherwise?
Yes, we did.
All the SLED did,
Yes, sir. And
locals?
Charles, Collin County as well, yes.
Law enforcement really worked together on this case, didn't it?
Yes, we did.
And is the individual that you took this statement from on August 11th of 2021 in the courtroom,
Yes, he is.
sitting between Mr. Harpootlian and Mr. Griffin?
Yes, sir, in a blue blazer and a white shirt.
We'd have to record so reflect. That's all we have at this time. Thank you.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Agent.
Good afternoon, sir.
Get my stuff organized here. We've heard you explain, and I think Agent Croft explained about sort of the investigative circle.
Yes, sir.
And I think you talked to Alec about that on the video, that he is in the circle.
Yes, sir.
And he was in the circle from the moment he called 911, correct?
I would say yes.
And no one had to give you any lead to put him in the circle, right?
No, sir. He called 911. He's the one who discovered him. He's closest in relation to him.
So when you're asked about, were you given any other credible leads except the one that led to Alex Murdaugh? I mean, he was there from the moment he called 911.
Yes, sir.
And what has happened over the last year and a half, 2 years is, as you explained, you've been unable to get him out of the circle. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
So if someone's in the circle and can't get themselves out, they end up sitting over there where he is today. That's what happens. Isn't that right?
As long as there's credible evidence to keep them in that circle, yes.
Well, we're going to get to that. Here, SLED failed to take immediate steps. I mean, maybe it's not all SLED, but SLED and the Collin County Sheriff's Department failed to take immediate steps to preserve evidence that could possibly exclude Alex Murdaugh from that circle. Would you agree with that?
I don't think it was a failure, no, sir.
Well, let's get this right. Your investigation, as I understand it, leads you to conclude that Paul and Maggie were murdered sometime between 8:50 p.m. on June the 7th and 9:06 p.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
And whoever murdered Maggie and Paul would, at a minimum, have in their possession an AR-15 style assault rifle and a 12-gauge shotgun, correct?
Not unless they got rid of it.
Well, the moment they were murdered,
Yes.
someone had to have, one person or two people had to have murder weapons, right?
Yes.
Paul was murdered with a 12-gauge, right?
Yes, sir.
You would agree then that the murderer had a 12-gauge shotgun.
Yes.
You would agree that the murderer had some AR style assault weapon that killed Maggie, right?
Yes, sir.
And you would agree at the time they were murdered, they would have those weapons.
Yes.
And would you agree that whoever murdered Maggie and Paul would likely have blood and biological material on them following the shotgun blast that essentially blew Paul's brains out of his head?
They would have some, yes.
And on the night of June the 7th, you said it was after midnight, so we'd go early morning hours, but 1 a.m. on June the 8th, you interviewed Alec, and he told you that he had left Moselle sometime between 9 and 9:10 to check on his mother. Is that right?
That is correct.
So if Alex was the perpetrator, as alleged, he would have had to brutally murder his wife and son sometime after 8:50 p.m. and 9:06, dispose of the murder weapons either somewhere on the Moselle property, within the Moselle residence, along the drive to Alameda, or at his mother's residence or property at Alameda. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, immediately when law enforcement arrived, they secured the immediate murder scene
That is my understanding, yes.
down at the kennels. And they eventually thoroughly searched the Moselle residence. There was search of the Moselle residence the next day, correct?
That is correct.
You know what time that was? Early afternoon, late morning?
That's approximate time, yes.
And no murder weapons were found in the residence, is that correct?
That is correct.
And no murder weapons were found on the property at Moselle, is that correct?
That is correct.
And was a search of the route between Moselle and Alameda ever done?
It wasn't walked from Moselle to Alameda, but it was driven several times.
And you didn't find any weapons there, correct?
No, sir.
And was a search of the waterways along the route done between Moselle and Alameda?
Most waterways, yes.
Excuse me?
Most waterways, I don't know if every single one was searched, but there were several waterways searched.
Now, we know from the General Motors OnStar data that delivered during the middle of this trial that Alex did not stop from the moment he left Moselle to drive to Alameda. Is that correct?
Correct.
You've reviewed that.
Yes.
There's no detours along the way, correct?
No, sir.
And you never searched the Alameda property for any signs of murder evidence, guns, bloody clothes, or anything until well after sometime in mid to late September. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You could have searched Alameda that night, correct?
If I had probable cause to, yes, sir.
Well, was anybody denying consent to search? When I say anybody, Alex Murdaugh gave you carte blanche consent to search anywhere in those properties, did he
Yes,
not?
yes, he did.
And John Marvin was assisting SLED and facilitating wherever you wanted to look. Wasn't he doing that?
He was, but the night of June 7th, even though Alec was in the circle, basically by default because of his close relationship with the victims and finding them, I did not consider him the main suspect or the only suspect because I had no probable cause and no evidence to support that he killed his wife and son.
Well, if a thorough, tight, quick, prompt investigation had been taken of the Moselle property, the route to Alameda, and the Alameda property, that could have possibly excluded Alec from this circle, couldn't it? If you found no evidence of guns, bloody clothes, or anything, right?
If you know what you're looking for and where to look, and have some type of information that would lead you to that area, yes.
And that opportunity was missed. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't say it was missed because it wasn't known about, other than, several hours later when we get to the bodies and there are no weapons found. It wasn't until the casings and the shot shells were recovered that I actually knew what the calibers were.
No, I get, okay. It's pretty clear the night of the murders, Colleton County Sheriff's deputies on the scene recognized the shell casings as being 300 blackouts, correct?
That is what they told me, but I want to verify for myself.
Right. And by 6, 7, 8 o'clock the next morning on June the 8th, Rogan Gibson had been interviewed where he said, I thought I heard Alex Murdaugh's voice in the background, right?
Yes, sir.
And Alec had told you that he left Moselle and gone to Alameda, right?
Yes.
And so as of the late morning of June the 8th, well, let me back up. That first interview with Alex, you state that he did not inform you that he was down at the kennels after dinner, right?
That is correct. He
And
said
you get information from Rogan Gibson that contradicted that.
yes.
And Alex Murdaugh is in the middle of the circle on the morning of June the 8th.
Well, I still needed to build a timeline because speaking with Alec, he was giving me some times, and I needed to build that timeline, and not having that coupled with Rogan's statement that he was 100% sure he was on the phone with Paul. He was 100% sure that he heard Maggie. He was only 99% sure, even though it's a great percentage. He said he was 99% sure it was Alec. I needed to gather some more information before I just go back and confront Alec on that.
Sure. Well, tell me what the thought process was behind searching the Moselle residence. What were you looking for?
Any types of ammunition. It was 300 blackout. We had the 12 gauge shot shells. We know that it's hunting goes on out there of all types. In the shed, there was some additional ammunition that was in a bucket. Needed to see what type of ammunition or firearms were in the house to try to get documentation of what was missing, what was there.
And why was Agent McAllister looking in the tubs and in the drains for guns?
Why was she?
Yeah.
You'll have to ask her. I wasn't there.
I mean, it's obvious that you were searching to see if there any evidence of blood in the house. You'd want to do that, right?
Yes.
Because Alex in the circle and he had been to the house.
Yes, sir.
Alex in the circle and he'd been to Alameda, right?
Yes, sir.
And no one went to Alameda to look for guns or blood or bloody clothes, did they?
Not that day, no, sir.
Would you agree that was an opportunity missed?
For Almeida, yes.
Now, we talked about the murder weapons. You would expect that the murder weapons would also have on them, at least the shotgun, the 12 gauge that killed Paul, would have some biological material, blood on the shotgun. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
And the assault weapon and the shotgun would have GSR on it, would it not?
Yes.
And if someone was transporting shotgun with blood on it and a rifle with GSR on it, and you got their vehicle, you would look for signs of that in their vehicle, would you not?
Yes.
And that was done here, was it not?
It was done on Suburban and the Mercedes, yes.
Excuse me?
It was done on the Suburban and the Mercedes, yes.
Yeah. And so there's nothing in the Suburban. There's no blood in the back where people would possibly carry guns. And when I say the back, I'm talking the back.
Cargo area, yes.
Yeah. There's no evidence of blood back there, right?
No, sir.
No evidence of GSR back there, was there?
No, sir.
There's no evidence of blood or GSR in the second or third seats, correct?
No, sir.
And the only GSR found in the Suburban was one speck on a seat belt buckle, right?
That is correct.
And there was one drip of blood confirmed on the steering wheel that comes back with Maggie's DNA. Is that right?
Yes.
And we know from the General Motors stuff we just got during the trial that Suburban never went down to the kennels until after Alec came back from Alameda. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So can we rule out that Alec put any guns from the murder in the back of the Suburban?
Unless it was wrapped in something.
Okay. And have you found anything it was wrapped in?
We have a blue raincoat that has numerous particles of GSR in it.
Let's talk about that blue raincoat for a second.
Certainly.
You developed information about a blue tarp from interviewing or SLED agents interviewing Shelley Smith. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you're doing a search sometime in September at Alameda for this blue tarp, you find a blue rain jacket rolled up in a closet, right?
I believe it was balled up. Yes, sir.
You say balled up, and you were there during the search, right?
Yes, sir.
And you also found a tarp somewhere else on the property, right? Excuse me, in the attic or somewhere.
Yes, sir. It was on the second floor, folded up in a tote in a closet with other things on top of the tote.
And so this blue rain jacket, you showed it to Shelley Smith, didn't you? Say, is this what you were talking about?
I showed her a picture.
You showed a picture to Shelley Smith?
I showed a picture to Shelley Smith to ask her if it was the similar color.
And when did you show Shelley Smith that picture?
I believe it was last month.
Last month. So was it during trial?
No, sir.
Is it preparing for trial?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. But you'd not shown her that before Alex Murdaugh had been indicted for murder, right?
No, sir.
But you had shown that blue rain jacket to a number of people to see if they recognized it.
I showed it to family members to see if they recognized it as being Alec, Maggie, Paul's, Buster's, or anybody else in the family.
And not a single family member recognized that blue rain jacket.
No, they did not.
And Shelley Smith described the tarp as she saw it laying out on Ms. Libby's retirement rocking chair, and it was a tarp, right?
She told me that it was a blue vinyl type looking tarp type material. And that Alec came in and it was folded up or balled up in his arms. And then after he left, she noticed it laying on the chair.
And so you showed her a picture of this balled up rain jacket and said, is it this color? Is that what you did?
I asked her, I knew she wasn't going to be able to identify the raincoat because the picture I showed her was it from our lab where it's opened up and spread out. And she's telling me that it was balled up. So I knew she's not going to be able to identify the raincoat, but she can at least identify or attempt to identify the color.
I mean, you read reports of her interview and probably saw her entire interview by video, did you not?
Yes.
And you understand that she said she saw that thing 2 times, right?
I don't recall that, sir.
You don't recall her?
Well, the 2 times with Alec coming in with it and then seeing it on the chair.
Yeah. And it wasn't balled up when she saw it on the chair. That's not the report you received, right?
No, but it also wasn't spread out, opened up like it was in the picture that I showed her.
She didn't tell you it was spread out, opened up on the retirement chair?
She told me it was laid across the chair is the information that I received.
Wasn't balled up though, right?
No, sir.
Yeah, you didn't show her a picture of the rain jacket, right?
I did show her a picture of the rain jacket.
As it's balled up.
No, sir.
You showed her a picture of the rain jacket that was open.
I believe I showed it. I'm not sure. I know I showed her the picture of it opened up to see if she recognized the color.
Okay. I think the jury will remember what she testified about, but.
Sustained.
And you know that rain jacket did not have any blood. I mean, they tested for blood. There's no blood on it, right?
I'm aware of that. Yes, sir.
And if someone had wrapped up shotgun killing Paul in that rain jacket, you expect to find blood, would you not?
At least DNA, yes.
Well, there's no
You
DNA
would
either,
think-
right?
Yes.
So there's no DNA and no blood in that rain jacket, right?
There's no DNA in yes.
And you know it was tested with LCV and there was no presumptive sign of blood there, right?
Correct.
So are you willing to agree that it doesn't look like that rain jacket was used to carry any murder weapons on the night of June the 7th?
They had weapons in them. I would believe that they had weapons in them at some time because there was GSR in them.
Yeah. And we don't know if that was 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 1 year ago, do we?
Correct.
We do know from folks working on the investigation that you're leading, is there's no blood or no DNA in that rain jacket.
Correct.
And you know from your experience that there would be blood on the shotgun, and if you're wrapping it up in that jacket, you're going to have blood on the jacket, right?
Well, you would believe that there would be blood or DNA on the barrel of the shotgun, but until you actually have it to test it, I can't sit here and say, yes, it would be there.
Okay. And we know it wasn't cleaned off because if it had been washed off, the GSR would have been washed off, correct?
If they wipe the exterior of the barrel for blood or DNA, but it still doesn't wipe off the particles that are in the barrel that could fall down and out.
All right. And let's talk about washdown. Did you notice any wet spots in the back of the Suburban?
No, sir.
You notice any wet spots in the back seat of the Suburban?
No, sir.
Did it look like the Suburban, anything wet had been placed in the Suburban?
No, sir.
And if Alex Murdaugh had cleaned up after committing these horrendous murders, wouldn't you expect to find some trace evidence of blood somewhere in the house, if that's where it occurred?
If he cleaned up in the house, yes.
And did you find any trace evidence of blood in the house indicated Alec had cleaned up?
If he cleaned up in the house, no.
So the answer is no, you didn't find any trace evidence of blood in the house. Is that correct?
No, sir.
That's not correct?
There was no trace evidence of blood found in the house, no.
Thank you. Did you find any blood on the carpet, floors, or anywhere throughout the house?
No, sir.
Now let's talk about Alec's clothes. On July 7th, 2021, you obtained the Snapchat video of Alex in khakis and this short sleeve dress shirt taken by Paul sometime on June the 7th. Is that correct?
I did not receive it on June the 7th, but I did receive it, yes.
You have notice when you received it?
There was a Snapchat, it was an extraction from his phone, from Paul's phone, and then we did a search warrant to Snapchat to get that video.
And you got the video in early July 2021?
I believe that's when we got it back.
And Agent, it may not be in your narrative, your case management notes, but
I don't see it indicated in my notes, but I know I did not get that Snapchat video the night of June the 7th or the early morning hours of June the 8th.
no, I said July. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Can
We
you
got
recall?
we got it a couple weeks after. Yes.
Yeah. So by early July, you had the Snapchat video,
Yes.
and it's in the evidence as Exhibit 306. Will you please just pull it up, Doug, and let's freeze it. Stop it right there. Now, is this the same video that you showed Alec during the August 11th, 2021 interview that the jury and all of us just watched?
It appears to be the same one. Yes.
I mean, and you're pointing out to Alec in that interview, you know, here's a picture of you in these clothes, and when did you change? That was your question, right?
Yes, sir.
And his answer was, I don't really remember when I changed. Is that right?
That is correct.
And does looks like he's wearing khaki pants, right?
Yes.
And it looks like a dress shirt. And I think that's what you called it in the interview. Is that right?
Yes.
Would you agree it looks like a blue dress shirt?
It's a light blue. Yes.
Okay. And you agree that on August the 11th, at the conclusion of the interview, you essentially confronted him. Did you kill Maggie? Did you kill Paul? And he asked, am I a suspect? That happened on August 11th. Is that right?
Yes, it did.
And you said, I got to go where the evidence leads me. Is
Yes.
that right? And you testified here today that on that date, Alex Murdaugh was the one and only suspect.
He was the only known suspect at that time. Yes.
And I think you testified that that you had interviewed Blanca, or you got some information from Blanca, but where Blanca had talked about a conversation she had with Alec after this interview on August 11th.
It was sometime later. Yes.
And Alec was asking during this conversation with Blanca, what do you remember I'm wearing?
Nature for the objection.
State the sweet self-serving hearsay it calls for. He's asking him what the defendant said.
Objection sustained.
Did you learn in the course of your investigation that after you confronted Alec as being suspect and showing him this video that he questioned Blanca about what he was wearing that day? Is that fair?
Yes.
Up until August 11th, Alec had given you carte blanche to search anywhere, anytime on any property he had. Is that right?
That is correct.
And on August 11th, he was encouraging you to try to get information from General Motors, and he would do whatever he could to facilitate that exchange, right?
Yes.
And up until August the 11th, I mean, you'd reached out to Alec, me, John Marvin, whenever you need to go on property to do anything, and you always got consent, correct?
That is correct.
And anything you asked, for the most part, it was provided.
Yes.
At no time prior to August the 11th, 2021, did you ask Alex Murdaugh, where's that blue shirt? Where are those khaki pants? Where are those shoes? Did you?
No, sir, I did not.
And you have never asked him for that blue shirt, those tan shoes, and those khaki pants, have you?
No, sir.
And the reason you didn't, because you weren't concerned about those clothes. Your investigation has been focused since early June on the T-shirt he was wearing, the shorts he was wearing, and the shoes he was wearing at the time he called 911, right?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And you were actively investigating whether or not the T-shirt had evidence of high velocity blood spatter, which you would expect to find on someone who was shooting Paul.
Back spatter, yes.
Back spatter. And your agency, in fact, engaged an expert out of state to give his assessment on whether there was high velocity back spatter on the T-shirt, shorts, or any part of the clothing, right?
Yes, we asked an individual to examine it to look for back spatter.
And that was after it had been sprayed with, the shirt had been sprayed with LCV to see if there was any indication of blood on the shirt.
Yes.
Okay. And I noticed that you opened up in these exhibit boxes. I mean, you pulled out Alex's shoes, you pulled out Alex's shorts. Mr. Meadows braided shorts around the courtroom. But you didn't pull out the shirt, is that correct?
No, sir.
Because the shirt is turned purple completely, has it not?
Yes,
Okay, and that was from treating it with this LCV.
that is correct.
Okay.
That is my understanding.
Right. Now, when you presented this case to the Colleton County Grand Jury to obtain a true bill indictment, you testified under oath that an expert had found multiple.
Is he talking about grand jury presentation? Carlton County, you can't, it's not a record of a county grand jury.
I didn't hear the complete question. It sounds objectionable, but let me hear the question.
Well, let me lay a foundation. Mr. Agent Owen, before you testified before the Colleton County Grand Jury, you prepared an outline of your presentation, did you not?
I did.
And in that outline, you identified essentially a narrative of what you were going to tell the grand jury, correct?
Yes.
And did you follow that narrative?
For the most part, yes.
And in that narrative, didn't you state that an expert found multiple particles of blood spatter on the shoulders and front of Alex's shirt? Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And is that what you told the Colleton County Grand Jury?
Yes.
However, what SLED and this expert out in Oklahoma overlooked is Agent Zapata's confirmatory blood testing, about which she testified earlier in this trial, that out of 74 cuttings from Alex's t-shirt, 0 tested positive for human blood. Y'all completely overlooked the fact that when you did a human tracing test to confirm whether it's blood, it came up negative. And wasn't that overlooked?
I had never seen that report.
Well, when did you see the report?
November of 2022.
After Alec had been indicted and months from trial, is that right?
Yes.
Now, a couple of things. You talked about on the tape that we just saw when you interviewed Alec. You told him that there's no unknown DNA taken from the crime scene. Do you remember that on the tape?
At that time, yes.
Making that representation?
Yes.
That was August 11th,
Yes, sir.
2021. On August 11th, 2021, did you know that there was unknown DNA of a male obtained from Maggie's fingernail clipping?
I believe what it was explained to me is there was one allele under the fingernail, which is not enough for confirmatory test on the DNA.
Okay. What did you hear in court? There are 3 alleles?
I heard that it was one.
And another thing, what was tested for DNA? Do you remember?
I do not have that report in front of me, so I'm not going to attempt to speak on that right now.
Yes. Well,
There was a multitude of items. I know that.
well, let's start with Alex's shirt was tested for DNA, was it not?
Yes.
Maggie's clothes were not tested for DNA, were they?
No, they were not.
Paul's clothes were not tested for DNA, were they?
No, they were not.
Now, in your communication with Mr. Bevel out in Oklahoma, at one point in time, he asked you to look into whether there was a blood mark in Paul's pocket and whether there was a matching blood mark on the outside of Paul's pocket. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Was any DNA testing done of that area?
No, sir.
But Alex's shirt was DNA tested front and back, right?
Correct.
But Alex wasn't the victim of any crime on the night of June the 7th, was he?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So why are you testing Alex Murdaugh's clothes for DNA? What are you expecting to find?
Evidence to include or exclude him.
Okay, so he had told you that he had gone up to the bodies of Paul and Maggie, right?
Yes.
And what DNA result would have excluded him?
Well, sorry, the lack of any other DNA would have excluded him.
All right, so you didn't find any other DNA except, I guess, Nolan Tootin when he hugged him that night, right?
Correct.
So did that exclude him?
Well, the shirt wasn't our only piece of evidence.
Well, the shorts. Did you find any?
The shorts weren't our only piece of evidence.
I'm trying to focus on DNA.
Okay.
I mean, so the DNA didn't really add much whatsoever. Is that correct?
Correct.
In fact, it certainly support conclusion that he could not have been wearing those clothes at the time Paul was murdered, right?
That's a distinct possibility, yes.
Well, I mean, we already talked about, and the jury's already seen how gruesome Paul's injuries were. They've seen the blood in the feed room, and they've seen everything that is unimaginable. There was no DNA found on Alex's shirt from Paul, was there? Except for the little piece down
There
the
was
hem.
some DNA of Paul on that shirt, yes.
There was just a little piece at the hem, is that right?
I believe there was one other spot, but yes.
In your outline to the Collin County Grand Jury, it indicates on page 18 that you found DNA in the areas of spatter that were identified belonging to Alec, Maggie, and Paul. Do you remember that?
Yes. And that was from the report that I had in my possession.
And was that accurate?
Now that I have that hemotrace report, the hemotrace indicates the parts that she tested, no human blood was found.
So you didn't know at the time, but you know now that what you told the Collin County Grand Jury was not correct. Is that fair?
In reference to the shirt, correct.
Talk about a few other things right quick. On the night of early morning hours of June the 8th, you obtained Alex's clothes, his shirt, shorts, shoes, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you mentioned in your testimony that you wanted to get them there and then, but Buster was coming to the house, and so you graciously allowed Alec to go greet his son, and then you went up and got his clothes, correct?
Yes.
And when you got his shirt, did you, well, let me back up. You were standing in the doorway as he was changing?
Yes.
So you could see him changing?
When he took his shorts off, I gave him some privacy.
And then he came out and dropped the shorts in a bag?
Yes. I can't remember if he dropped them in there or if he handed them to me and then I put them in there.
And if he handed them you would have had latex gloves on for sure, right?
Yes.
And did you put the shorts in one bag
Yes.
and then drop the T-shirt in another bag?
Yes.
And the shoes, I guess, in a third bag?
Yes, sir.
And did that happen sort of in the hallway?
That happened right there while I was standing in the doorway, yes.
And at the time, Alec was wearing, I guess, sort of like gym shorts or something he'd put on.
He put on clothes after he had changed, yes.
Do you remember what kind of clothes he put on? Like,
Not exactly, no, sir. I
were they
don't.
shorts?
I don't recall what he put on afterwards.
Was it a t-shirt?
I do not recall what he put on afterwards.
Can you say for sure it wasn't a pair of khaki pants? Can you say for sure it was not a pair of khaki pants?
I do not know what he put on afterwards.
Now, we've heard about a pair of khaki pants laying on the floor in the bathroom. Did SLED, Agent McAllister, anyone ever sees a pair of khaki pants from the house?
Not to my knowledge.
One of the things that you testified to, and I just want to see if we can clear it up. I don't, you stated in your testimony that Alec indicated he attempted to contact Nolan Tootin that night. Are you sure it was Nolan and it wasn't Rogan?
He contacted Nolan Tootin that night and attempted to contact Rogan Gibson that night.
Okay. And you also mentioned that as you're driving from Charleston, it's intermittently raining, sometimes hard, sometimes not so hard.
Yes, sir.
And then when you got to Moselle, it looked like it had been raining. Sometimes it rained hard, sometimes not so hard.
Yes, sir.
And wasn't it true that rain was dripping off the rooftop of the kennels and above the feed room onto Paul's body?
That's a fair assessment.
And on his body, and then it was washing down the concrete pad. I mean, that's a fair assessment also, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And if the jury has seen in this trial photos of puddles of water that may look like blood, it's very easily explainable that it came from the rain dropping on Paul's body, right?
Yes.
Now, I think you covered it. Alex Murdaugh called you multiple times in June and July and early August asking for an update. Did he not?
We communicated. Sometimes it was via text and sometimes it was via phone call.
You're right. And not only did he want an update for himself, but he also kept wanting you to update Maggie's parents as well.
And I met with Maggie's parents, yes.
Sure. But Alec was requesting that of you, was he not?
Well, he was requesting that of me, yes, but I also intended to meet with Maggie's parents regardless if he requested it or not.
Okay. And you're also aware that Alec and Buster and his family put up a reward for tips.
I knew a reward was offered. It was under my impression that it came from the law firm, but I know that a reward was offered of $100,000 with an expiration date.
And in the interview of August 11th, one of the questions that Alec had of you was essentially whether Maggie and or Paul suffered.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And I think you told them that if they did, it wasn't for very long, a matter of seconds. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Now, we talk about the shot shells. The shot shells that were found in the feed room where Paul was murdered, there was a buckshot and I think it was Winchester dry lock
Mhm.
waterfowl.
Yes, sir.
That's not turkey load, right?
I was told it was turkey load at first. I'm not a hunter. I'm not 100% sure. I know it was small pellets and big pellets.
Right.
I know the difference between small pellets and buckshot.
And that after, okay. So you were operating lead investigator under the impression that it was buckshot and turkey load, right?
Yes. Someone told me that night that it was turkey load.
And turns out it wasn't turkey load. You agree with that?
I agree.
Okay. And I think Agent Croft got involved because of his knowledge of firearms and shot shells and the works, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you mentioned that in the interview, you told Alec that that there were multiple guns found on the property that were loaded with buckshot and turkey load. Do you remember that?
I believe I used buckshot, birdshot.
Okay. Well, I mean, Agent Croft had testified, but can you identify any weapons that were loaded with buckshot and birdshot that were found in the house?
Repeat the question.
Can you identify any weapons found in the house at Moselle that were loaded with buckshot and birdshot?
No, sir.
Now, when you told Alec that there were multiple weapons loaded with that same load, buckshot and birdshot, I mean, was that an investigative tool, or were you just under the misimpression that that was the case?
Investigative tool.
So you lied to him.
I'm allowed to use trickery to elicit a response.
I understand. And so you're trying to trick him. Agreed?
I'm allowed to use trickery to elicit a response. Yes.
And you're allowed to do it, and you did it.
Yes.
But you also testified under oath in front of the state grand jury. You said basically the same thing, that there were 4 shotguns on the Moselle property and they were loaded with buckshot and turkey load.
Yes.
Now, were you mistaken then, or were you trying to trick the state grand jury?
No, I was not trying to trick the state grand jury.
You were mistaken.
No.
What did you not?
The shotguns that we recovered from the house had 2 different loads in them. They weren't Winchester or Federal. They had different loads in them. So when I tell the state grand jury that there's different loads in the shotguns, there were different loads in the shotgun.
So you're saying you weren't telling them that it was buckshot and turkey load, but you were telling them it was just different brand names of something.
I may have used buckshot and turkey load or birdshot, but they were 2 different loads.
Well, I think we established that you did not find, SLED did not find any weapons at the house with buckshot and turkey load loaded in, right?
That is correct.
I'm gonna show you page 48, line 7 through 14 of your statewide grand jury testimony. Hey, gentlemen, do you recognize that to be a copy of your state grand jury testimony?
Yes, I do.
And what date was that given?
Tuesday, November 16th, 2021.
All right, and if you'll go to the page I had open. And I tell you, I'm going to read the question if you'll read the response. It says, at line 7, all right, and were all of them, to your recollection, loaded that like that? And your answer was?
They were located loaded in a similar fashion. Yes.
Question, in a similar fashion?
Yes, sir.
Question, with one turkey load and one buckshot load?
Response, yes, sir.
All right, thank you. And that was not accurate, correct?
Correct.
I mean, people do make mistakes, do they not?
Yes, they do make mistakes.
And people make mistakes about time frequently. Is that right?
I would believe that would be the most mistake made is time.
Okay. And here, you were asked to identify inconsistencies with Alex's statements to you, and the one that you pointed out was times. Do you recall that?
Well, the inconsistencies is they kept changing.
Well, that's right. I mean, you said that he said on June 8th he was at his mother's for, quote, a little while. And then you said he changed it on June 10th to 25 to 30 minutes. Do you remember testifying to that?
I do.
And then you said on August the 11th, he said he was there 45 minutes to an hour.
Yes.
Okay. And you found that those were inconsistent.
Well, there was a difference between 20 to 30 minutes and 45 minutes to an hour.
Well, let's work on that. He left well, let me tell you, he told you that he left the Moselle property between 9 and 9:10, did he not?
He showed me his text messages and it was narrowed down to 9:06. Yes.
All right. So he clearly told
9:04, 9:06.
So on the night of June 7th, early morning hours of June 8th, he told you, looking at the text message, I left here at 9:06. Is that right?
Correct.
And he got back when he called 911 about 10:06, right?
Correct.
And so he was gone to his mother's almost an hour, was he not?
He was away from Moselle for an hour, but my question to him was, how long were you at your mother, or how long were you at Amita?
And in your investigation, as we established in my cross-examination of you moments ago, I don't know how long I've been standing here, a few minutes ago, it's your investigative belief that Maggie and Paul were murdered sometime between 8:50 and 9:06, correct?
Yes.
So for your investigative purposes, does it make any difference if he's at his mother's house 25 minutes, 35 minutes? Obviously, he couldn't be there an hour and make it back and call 911, but I mean, isn't that really not material? How long he was at his mom's?
If I'm trying to build a timeline, yes, it is.
Well, your timeline is, you're focused on is 8:50 to 9:06, right?
Well, my timeline and what we're talking about is how long he was away from the house when he says he went to Alameda. So he leaves Moselle at approximately 9:06 is when
Right.
he sends the text to Maggie. And the 911 call comes in at 10:06. So I know he's away from Moselle for an hour. And he says he goes to Alameda. How long did you spend at Alameda?
Right.
He tells me 20 to 30 minutes. Then he goes 45 minutes to an hour.
I see. I got it. So it's possible that he was only at Alameda for 5 minutes and he was spending the other time hiding evidence. I mean, I understand that would be what you're looking at, right?
Yes.
But General Motors has sent their records in and we know he went straight to Alameda and goes straight back, right?
That is true, but if you look at the GPS points that came from General Motors, one of them puts him way in the backyard of Almeda,
Right.
not in the driveway or where it's normal for them to park.
In the backyard at the door where Miss Shelley Smith says he knocked on it.
I believe that point's closer to Miss Libby's work shed.
Okay, we'll get there. Okay. But we know from phone records, essentially when he got there, like 9:22, correct?
Yes, sir. I believe that's the time, yes.
And we know from the GM telemetry data and the GM and OnStar and other records, what time he left, about 9:45, right?
Yes,
And so we know exactly how long he was there.
yes.
But the fact that he couldn't recall whether he and Paul rode around for an hour and a half, two and a half hours, you found that significant in your investigation.
Yes.
Now, you also testified that that in the fall of 2021, there started up a financial investigation into Alex financial dealings. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you said that overlapped and fed off each other with what your murder investigation was doing?
Yes, it involved Alec.
Right.
So we were looking at the totality of the circumstances and seeing if there was any paths that crossed or.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, I'll skip one part. In your interview, and as of August 11th, you told us that you had excluded everyone from the circle who had come in to the circle except for Alec, and he was your one and only suspect at that point in time.
Yes.
And you talked about interviewing CB Rowe and him telling you where he was on June 7th, right?
Yes.
But he later, you found out, he lied to you about where he was on June 7th, right?
Yeah, he came forward and was honest with us without us even approaching him.
All right. But he was initially told you one thing about where he was, subsequently told you I was not honest about where I was.
Yes, he didn't want Mr. Murdaugh to know that he was looking for another job in fear of being fired.
Okay. But part of this financial investigation that overlapped, you developed information that Alec was stealing money from a law firm, client money to support a drug addiction, did you not?
That's what was purported, that it was for a drug addiction, yes.
And you learned through your investigation that Alec was paying up to $50,000 a week to a guy named Curtis Eddie Smith for drugs, right?
That's what was told to us, yes.
And you learned through this investigation what was told to you that Eddie was buying these drugs from other folks, members of Sandhill Drug Gang, right?
Yes.
And the Sandhill Drug Gang was a precursor to the Cowboys drug ring, right?
I'm not familiar with the Cowboys, but that's what I've been told, yes.
And you learned that Eddie owed these drug gang members a lot of money for drugs that were sold to Alec, didn't you?
I believe the information came into that they weren't worried about what was owed because they knew they were going to get paid.
That came to you after the Maggie and Paul were murdered, right?
That came to us after September-ish incident as well.
And did you ever conduct a cell phone analysis of these drug gang members to see where they were on the night of June the 7th?
I didn't have their phone numbers. In my experience, that they don't keep the same phone numbers. They use what's called burner phones, But we also did an analysis around Moselle, trying to encompass anybody else coming in. And that information did not pan out. There was only 2 people identified, and they were emergency first responders.
And you're talking about the geofencing stuff.
Yes, sir.
Well, did you ever obtain any DNA samples from these drug gang members to see if they matched Maggie's fingernail?
No, sir.
And you really never put them in the circle, did you?
The investigation into that, in my understanding, I'm not investigating the drug aspect. That investigation is still ongoing from my understanding.
One second, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, if y'all would go to the jury room for a break. Yes, sir.
Your Honor, and I know we've been in trial 4 weeks. I certainly don't want to mistry this, and I don't think anybody in the world does. But it's the state's belief on his last questions that they opened the door to the roadside shooting. Before I ask,
Question this witness about that?
to follow up when Eddie Smith came into the, how he came in the investigation.
He's in the middle of cross-examination at this moment.
Okay, I just, can I ask him when Eddie Smith came into the investigation?
You want to ask him questions?
Well, I didn't want to do anything to mistrial, and I was surprised that came up.
I understand, and I agree with you. But now is not the time for you to, in the middle of his cross-examination, to bring the jury. You may continue.
Just a few loose ends, Agent Owen. In your investigation, you did not identify any life insurance on the lives of Maggie and Paul. Is that correct?
No, I did not.
And one of the things that was asked of Dr. Reamer about a conversation she had with you as to the stain on Maggie's calf. Do you remember whether Dr. Reamer told you that there's a bruise there as well?
It's in my notes. Hang on just a moment. According to my notes, we talk about believes first shot was to Maggie's legs, then abdomen, followed by the wrist to headshot with final rear headshot. There was a bruise on Maggie's left calf that coincided with possibly shoe print, but Dr. Reimer did not feel someone intentionally stood on her leg. And that's according to my notes.
Yes, sir. And your notes related to there was a muddy thing on the back of her calf, and Dr. Reimer noticed there was a bruise there as well. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Lastly, the fingerprints. Were there any dusting for fingerprints done in the feed room at Moselle?
I am not aware if there was or not. I wasn't in the feed room with the crime scene the entire time.
Okay. And and we talked about the DNA swabs. I mean, one of the people that was supplying Curtis Eddie Smith is in custody, is he not?
He is in custody, yes, sir.
Have you gotten a DNA swab from him?
I have not, but I know one has been obtained, yes.
Okay. And you know if it's been cross-checked against?
It was not obtained in this case. I don't know. I believe it has been cross-checked.
Okay.
I don't have that report in front of me.
Yeah, another point, just understand you were not made aware of the negative hemotrace confirmatory blood test until sometime in November of 2022. Is that right?
That is correct.
How is it that the lead case agent is left out of the information channel for something so significant?
From what I was able to figure out, when the lab issues reports, and pursuant to my case or any other agent's case, we have email notifications to go in and find that report, or, there's a new report available. Once I figured out that report existed, I searched my emails and I did not have an email notification that that report was there. There's multiple other reports. I had been in there multiple times looking at other reports, and that report, I did not see that report. I was not made aware of its existence.
Sure. And it wasn't until after you saw that report that now you changed focus to the clothes he was wearing in the Snapchat video. Is that correct?
Restate that question.
It wasn't until after you became aware that there's no blood, hemotrace confirmatory test of blood on Alex's shirt that you start, asking questions of folks about the clothing that Alex was wearing in the Snapchat video.
Well, I asked him on August the 11th of 2021, because I had that Snapchat video. When did he change clothes?
Okay. And he said
He didn't know.
he didn't know. Okay. But you never asked for those clothes, never tried to find those clothes, never executed a search warrant for those clothes, have you?
No, sir.
Did you develop any information that Eddie Smith was skimming money, that Alex was paying him for the drugs, that he wasn't paying the Sandhills gang everything they were due?
I am not aware of that information.
And the last thing, you had mentioned that part of your, and on the tape interview with Alex, you had mentioned that the blackout cartridges that were found near Maggie's body matched, or they were ejected, extracted from the same firearm as used to eject, extract cartridges at the house and the shooting range. Remember telling Alex that?
Yes.
And, but you were informed, though, that forensically at the lab, they could not say with 100% confirmation that they did actually match until the missing firearm is recovered.
That was my understanding, yes.
That's what Agent Greer or others that he worked for and told you as lead case agent.
That's what Mr. Greer told me, yes.
That he couldn't say with 100% certainty. Is that right?
Of which he couldn't say 100% certainty which firearm that came out of until he had a firearm to compare it to.
Thank you.
Redirect.
Did he say that those shell casings from Maggie's body, the side of the house, and the shooting range were all cylinder and had been in the same gun at one time?
Yes.
And when you asked the defendant on that in the third interview, they said this was told him, Jackson, what I told you. So it was a family-owned gun, right?
Yes.
And then he kind of responded, how did they get it? He was almost going with you. How did they get it, right?
Yes, sir.
That was one of the ways you get somebody out of the center by asking them to give statements.
Yes, sir.
Tell me what happened.
Yes, sir.
And on June 7th, did you say, tell me what happened?
Yes, sir.
And on June 10th, did you say, tell me what happened?
Yes, sir. And on June 10th, I wanted more detail.
I'm sorry.
I wanted more detail on June 10th.
And did you get more detail?
I got more detail on June 10th, yes.
And on August 11th, did you give some information and then try to gain some information?
That is correct.
And Mr. Griffin asked you about that shirt and all. Did he say, Bo, hold on, let me go get that thing and bring it back to you right now?
The shirt? No, sir.
He didn't say, hold on, I'll go and get that shirt right now.
Talking about the white T-shirt?
No, sir,
No, the
I'm
blue
talking
shirt?
about on August 11th.
Oh,
He used
August-
the
no,
shirt
sir.
that he was talking.
No, sir.
And he tried to describe it. Did this, what is described as a seafoam shirt? Were you familiar with that?
Leading and misleading.
How would that shirt be described? Do you know in your investigation by the witness who saw it? Ms. Blanca, since
Ms. Blanca described to me that she saw him leaving the house that Monday morning in a seafoam pullover. I believe she characterized it as a Vinnie Vine shirt.
she said a polo shirt leaving that morning.
Yes.
On this video he showed you with the tree,
That's
how
it.
would she describe that shirt in the tree?
A blue button-up she described as a Columbia-style shirt.
Columbia. Seafoam. Seafoam color?
Don't lead the witness.
Did she tell you what color she thought it was?
The one leaving that morning?
No, sir.
No, the
one on
one
the
in
tree.
blue.
On June 7th, June 10th, August 11th, did Alex Murdaugh ever mention anybody else that might be a potential suspect in this case?
No, sir. Other than, he continued to mention the boat case, but no specific individual.
Did he mention to you anything about these cowboys that Mr. Griffin's asked you about?
No, sir.
Did he mention to you anything about a Curtis Edward Smith?
No, sir.
June 7th he didn't?
No,
June
sir.
10th he didn't?
No, sir.
August 11th he didn't?
No, sir.
When did he ask you about Curtis Edward? Or when did he bring in Curtis Edward Smith into this investigation? He being Alex Murdaugh.
September 4th, 2021.
September 4th, 2021. And could you tell us how that came about?
Overruled.
Continue.
How did it come about that Mr. Murdaugh told you about Curtis Edward Smith?
On September 4th, 2021, I received a phone call from Randy Murdaugh that Alec had been shot, and they were concerned for his safety and what was going on. And I immediately responded, along with other agents, to the scene. And the scene on Old Salkehatchie Road in Varnville, Hampton County.
And did you go to that scene?
I did.
And did you see the defendant Alex Murdaugh at the scene?
No, I did not. He had been transported to the hospital.
And do you know where he was transported?
I believe it was Savannah, a hospital in Savannah.
And at that point, did you or another SLED agent go to Savannah Hospital to interview the defendant?
2 other agents went to the hospital to interview Alec.
And was one of those agents Neil?
No, Agent Kelly.
Agent Kelly? You in the courtroom? Will you please stand? Is that him?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And in the hospital, and what day was this?
September 4th, 2021.
September 4th, 2021. And at that point, did the defendant, or did you learn through an investigation, did he say somebody shot him on the side of the road?
Yes, through the investigation, that's what's told to us.
Well, did he identify anybody on September 4th who shot him?
Not by name, he gave a description.
He gave a description.
Yes.
Did he attempt to pick somebody out of a book?
No, sir. There was I believe a SLED forensic composite artist went down and did a composite drawing with him.
So he helped get a sketch of the person who shot him?
Yes, sir.
Describe the person?
Yes, sir.
Did they actually do a sketch?
Yes, sir. They did.
And at that point, had he mentioned anybody's name else in the investigation that you ought to go back and look at about Paul and Maggie's murder?
No, sir.
After that, did the defendant tell you or your law enforcement friends he was lying about the roadside incident.
Objection to extend its hearsay. If he didn't tell this agent, then it's not the appropriate witness.
Yes, sir.
Did the defendant give another statement about the roadside?
Yes, he did.
Did he admit he was lying?
Statement to you or to someone else?
Statement to someone else, sir.
Objection sustained.
At what point, in response to their question, did the defendant bring in Curtis Eddie Smith's name to this?
I don't believe he ever brought Curtis Smith's name into it. It was through investigation that we developed him as a suspect or a subject involved in the shooting.
And did the defendant give an interview with Mr. Harpootlian and Mr. Griffin via audio phone call where they mentioned Curtis Edward Smith?
Objection is overruled.
I know an interview was conducted. I don't know who was present. I was not present for that interview.
Did Curtis Edward Smith come through this chief investigator's name come out of that interview?
I do not know, sir.
But prior to that day, had Alex Murdaugh ever mentioned to you Curtis Edward Smith or anybody else that might have been involved in his son's or mother's, his son's or his wife's murder?
No, sir.
So after the roadside incident and whatever he told whoever's going to be called, that's when he brought in other people.
Yes, sir.
Now, Mr. Griffin's asked a lot of questions about the search. The crime scene where the two bodies were, was that secure?
Yes, it was.
Was evidence gathered?
Yes, it was.
Were swabs taken?
Yes, they were.
And I think he asked you about the Suburban, his Suburban, and whether or not there was anything wet in the back of his car. Are you familiar with what's known as a cooler?
Yes.
A good old cooler?
Yes, sir.
Could you put wet garments in a cooler?
You can, yes.
You can.
Yes.
Okay. Can you ask you about anything in the car? Was there blood on the steering wheel of Suburban, that car?
There was blood found on that steering wheel, yes.
And that DNA from that blood came back to whom?
Maggie Murdaugh.
Maggie Murdaugh.
Yes, sir.
And he asked you about some guns. Did the defendant hand you a gun?
He handed first responders a gun, yes, sir.
What type of gun was that?
It was a 12-gauge shotgun.
When I say you sometime, I mean law enforcement. I
I understand.
apologize. And as a result of swabs, was blood identified on that gun?
Yes, sir.
Whose blood, whose
Maggie.
DNA was that?
Maggie Murdaugh.
Maggie Murdaugh.
Yes.
And was that 12-gauge shotgun consistent or inconsistent with the weapon that killed Paul Murdaugh?
It was the same gauge, being a 12-gauge, and firearms examiner was not able to exclude the gun.
Which means he could include it but not exclude it.
Correct.
And Mr. Griffin asked you about getting out of the circle. When you talk to somebody, are you looking for consistent statements, inconsistent when you're examining or talking to somebody who might be involved? Why are you asking them questions?
To learn more, to see if they tell the same story.
And if that story is contradicted by other witnesses, do you want to know that?
Yes, sir.
And were you going out to check his story with other witnesses?
Yes,
What he told you versus what other witnesses told you?
correct.
As a result of that, were there contradictions between what Mr. Murdaugh told you and what witnesses told you?
Yes,
Shelley Smith,
yes,
Blanca Simpson?
yes.
And he asked you, it's been a long time about this time frame. Why does it matter when he got out to Alameda? Would it matter if somebody's hiding guns somewhere on Alameda? Would you need time to do that?
You would need time, but if you're familiar with it, I don't think you would need that much time.
But would it take time to go hide guns?
5 minutes, 10 minutes. Yes.
Would it take time? Would that be a reason you might have a contradictory statement how long you visited
Yes.
somebody?
Yes.
And your car would still be there, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Did CB, he asked you about CB Road. Did he ever identify did he ever tell you about a cooler that was found out there at some point that wasn't usually there?
Yes, out by what's been referred to as the skin shed where they process meat.
What was that about that cooler? In course of your investigation, had that cooler been there before this night?
CB Rowe told us it was not. When he left on Friday, prior to the,
Objection sustained.
Did you see that cooler after Friday?
did I see the cooler on when CB Rowe pointed it out? Yes,
You did see it.
yes.
And was it there Saturday, excuse me? Did you see it on Monday or Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning?
Monday night, Tuesday morning, yes, I did see it.
Did you see that cooler again?
I don't recall.
Okay. He asked you about the rain jacket, the tarp, and asked you if, was there any blood or notes it must give me. Is that coat, does that repel water? That jacket, the rain jacket?
Yes, I would think so. Being in a rain jacket.
Was there GSR located on that rain jacket?
On the inside of it, yes.
Say it again, on the where?
On the inside,
And he asked you about blood or DNA. Was there a whole bunch of GSR found on that inside of that rain jacket?
yes, it was.
And he asked you about, I believe, Shelley's testimony or about seeing that rain jacket. Did you say he was holding it like this?
Yes, she said it was balled up in his arms.
And he was asking you about timing, I think, unless I'm crazy. That could be there 5 years, 10 years. When did Blanca's system, when did Shelley Smith, I'm sorry, tell your investigation, hey, I saw him with this blue vinyl coat? When was that in relation to the murders? Was that 5 years, 10 years? How long?
Objection, Your Honor. He's misstating the
Objection
evidence
is overruled.
in the record.
She told us she saw it the day after Mr. Randolph Murdaugh's funeral, which through my investigation,
Objection is overruled.
which would have been June 14th, the following Monday after Paul and Maggie were murdered. So 7 days.
Was there? Now, he asked you about your testimony to the Colleton grand jury.
Yes, sir.
I didn't know it was out there. Did you give them a summary of the case?
The grand jury, yes.
And Did that include timeline?
I believe so, yes.
Some of his financial crimes,
Yes, sir.
background?
Yes, sir.
Did that include information the jury hears from some of these lawyers and their financial issues?
Yes, sir.
Did that include whether blackout casings near Maggie were consistent with those or match those found near the house and the property?
It did.
Did it include that the family had 3 blackout rifles?
Yes.
Alex originally gave 2, but remembered in the follow-up, one of them had been replaced.
Yes, sir.
That you've confirmed that?
Yes.
Did you present whether or not shotguns of similar make and load were found on the property?
Yes.
Did you present that Alex was in possession of a shotgun that was consistent with one of the murderous weapons? Couldn't be excluded?
Correct.
And did you mention to them about Shelley Smith and kind of what we've just been talking about?
Yes, sir.
Did you mention to them about defendant denying going to the kennels 3 times?
Yes.
Leading the witness.
Don't leave the witness.
What did you tell them about him going to the kennels?
That after dinner, he stayed at the house and took a nap. When Maggie went to the kennels and Paul left, he wasn't sure where he went, but that he was never at the kennels after dinner.
Did you mention to them about Rogan Gibson?
And the phone call that he had with Paul, and that Rogan had heard, Paul was talking to Paul on the phone, heard Maggie in the background, and he was 99% sure that he heard Alec in the background. And that phone call would have been around 8:44 p.m.
Did you mention about this to the grand jury, this video ultimately got located or downloaded?
That it was found on Paul's phone.
And did you tell them the contents of that video?
Yes, that Paul was taking a video of the dog, Rogan Gibson's dog, Chocolate Lab, and that Maggie was in the background, and that Alec was in the background.
And did you present to them about I think some of what we heard, the money he acquired, he being Alex, after this incident, the money he came into?
Yes.
Did you mention to them about whether Maggie intended to go to Moselle that night or not? What did you say to them about Maggie going to, and her plans, or whether she was going to go to Moselle that night or wanted to, if anything?
That Maggie had intended to go to Edisto, but had received a call from Alec requesting her to come home, that Paul was there, which contradicted the statements from the sister, Marion, where Maggie, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Maggie had called Marion and said that she had received a call from Alec, that Alec wanted her to come to Moselle, that Paul was there and his dad was in the hospital. But during an interview with Alec in August, he stated that it was basically a surprise. He didn't know she was coming.
And did you mention to them that a reward had been offered on the offer?
That a reward was offered, $100,000 with an expiration date.
And did you tell them whether or not there was any other information or any other credible evidence pointing to anybody else?
I did.
Mr. Griffin asked you about the scene. It was bloody.
Very bloody.
Defendant said he had touched and rolled, tried to move Paul.
Yes, sir.
Did you see any evidence of that on him?
No.
Your eyes.
I did not see any on Alec. No, sir.
Mr. Griffin's gone. I don't know if it's a good question or not. Did they say go to Alameda?
Who?
Him,
No, sir.
Alex Murdaugh, any of the lawyers there.
No.
They give you consent to search Alameda that night?
No, sir.
They said, go search Alameda.
No, sir.
Is that funny? I'm sorry.
Him addressing me. If I found your question humorous, I'm sorry. I thought it was a funny question. It was a rhetorical question. I asked the court to instruct him not to address me, but the witness. Thank you.
You may proceed.
I guess the point is Griffin said they were bending over, wanting to help, wanting to do all this. Never mentioned Curtis Smith or anybody else until September, right?
Leading.
Can't lead the
I'm
witness.
sorry, I apologize. Did he ever mention anybody else who could have done this, who could have been involved with, who could have killed my wife and my son from June 7th, 2021 until September of 21? Did he ever mention anybody else?
No, he did not.
He's already answered.
Thank you.
Further questions?
Yes, Your Honor. Is it police procedure that the suspect of your investigation is supposed to solve the crime?
No, it's not, but it helps to have information from other sources.
And you were asked a number of what ifs. One what if was like, what if he hid the guns in Alameda? How long would that take? And you said 5 minutes, right?
I said 5 or 10 minutes, depending on if you know the area.
What if you'd gone over there that night and searched Alameda? How long would that have taken?
Quite sometimes, large property.
And we would know today that there were no guns hidden on the property.
Well, that night, Alec was not considered a main suspect, and I had no information to go search Alameda for guns.
At what point in time did you ask Alec, did you hide guns at Alameda?
I didn't.
First time that question ever came to you was on February 15th at 4:30 in the afternoon. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Now, I think you testified about item 22, and I just may not have heard you correctly, but and Mr. Greer's testimony will speak for itself, but the results were he can't say it's item 22 is a shotgun that Alec had when Deputy Green came in, but he can't say, he can't exclude it, he can't exclude it. He can't say anything about it.
Correct.
Okay. Now, you mentioned what Shelley Smith told you in an interview, I take it. Did she tell you? Did you ever
Yes.
interview Shelley Smith?
Yes, I did.
And you testified that she told you that Alec came over there on June 14th in the morning, right? That's what you testified to this jury. That's what she told you.
She told me it was the day after Mr. Murdaugh's, Randolph Murdaugh's funeral.
All right.
Through my research, would have been June 14th.
And you were here in the courtroom when she testified under oath in front of this jury that Alec came over there 3 days later, and it was June the 16th on Wednesday. You heard that testimony, didn't you?
That's what she said in court, yes.
That was her sworn testimony, correct?
Yes.
That's all the question I have.
You may step down. Call your next witness.
This call is David Gross.
Do you swear or affirm that any testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
You would please, sir, be seated, state your full name for the record, spell your last name.
My name is David Grubbs, GRUBBS.
Good afternoon, Mr. Grubbs. Where are you
Afternoon.
employed, sir?
I'm employed with the South Carolina Attorney General's office.
All right. And what is your job title at the Attorney General's office?
I'm the Chief Forensic Investigator for the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force.
All right. And then just briefly, let the jury know what the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force does.
So we assist agencies throughout the state as well as have our own investigators, and we look into peer-to-peer downloads that go over the internet, usually containing child pornography in them. We also do chat ops throughout the state, posing as minors to attract suspects.
Okay.
My unit specifically does the computer forensics for those cases.
Okay. When you say forensics, you mean, for instance, cell phone forensics, correct?
Yes,
So as part of your job duties, you perform cell phone downloads, extractions, and analyze them, correct?
correct.
And you've gone to a number of trainings in the past to that's focused on that.
Yes, sir.
Correct. All right. Can you read for the jury your training in this area, please?
Sure. So I am a Celebrite certified operator, a Celebrite certified physical analyst. I'm a certified blacklight examiner, which both of those are cell phone data extraction tools. I'm certified in Forensic Explorer, which is used to analyze computers. Griffi analyze training, Tatigo in the area of magnet forensics, which is magnet makes the tool Axiom, which is one of our primary tools that we use. I've received advanced iOS and gray key training, advanced iOS examinations, magnet Axiom advanced mobile forensics, Axiom based computer forensic examination, and Axiom advanced computer forensics. I'm also a member of the United States Secret Service Cyber Task Force, Cyber Fraud Task Force to be specific, which runs the National Computer Forensic Institute in Hoover, Alabama, where I've been sent to for basic network investigations, Macintosh forensic training, digital investigation supervisor's course, and I received an award in 2020 and 2021 being ranked in the top forensic examiners with the Secret Service. I've had training from the National White Collar Crime Center, which is called NW3C, in basic data recovery and acquisition, intermediate data recovery and acquisition, basic cell phone investigation, cell phone interrogation, advanced wireless network investigations, GPS interrogation, Windows artifacts, social media, identifying and seizing electronic evidence, encryption, and legal concerns for digital evidence responders. I've also been to the SANS Institute for multiple trainings for advanced network forensics and analysis, advanced digital forensics and incident response, hacker tools, techniques, exploits, and incident handling. I've taken a course with Texas A&M Engineering Service for information security. And then for other forensic softwares, I have had Access Data Bootcamp, Access Data Mac Forensics, Encase Computer Forensics. And in addition to that, pretty much every year except for when COVID was going on, we'll go to a national training for law enforcement on child exploitation in Atlanta.
All right. Thank you. At this time, state would move to enter Investigator Grubbs as an expert in cell phone forensics.
No objections. So qualified.
And Investigator Grubbs, there are 3 cell phones in evidence in this case, and the data associated, you've analyzed some of it, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's talk specifically about Paul's phone. And to your knowledge, was that originally extracted by, I believe, John Van Outen of the Secret Service?
Yes, sir.
And then provided to, that information provided to Lieutenant Britt Dove?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you received that cell phone information from him, and you've analyzed it as well, correct?
I did.
Okay. And you were asked to focus on a couple of specific areas in your analysis of Paul's phone, correct?
Yes, sir.
One of which was Paul's battery habits and battery usage on his cell phone, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 530. Do you recognize that?
I do.
And what is that?
That is a report that I generated concerning Paul's phone and battery and shutdown time with the phone.
Okay. And you looked, in the week prior to the murders, you looked at how many times Paul's phone it died because of its battery, correct?
Correct.
And you identified those times, right?
Yes,
Dates
sir.
and times.
Yes, sir.
So how many times that week did his phone die in total that week from the battery?
4.
All right. And what days were those on?
It looks like June the 3rd, twice on June the 5th, and then on June the 7th.
June 7th, it died when?
It is 10:34 p.m.
10:34 p.m. Okay. And one of the pieces of information that cell phones log is when a phone is plugged back in after it's died to charge, correct?
Yes,
All right. And when you looked at this data of when the phone died that week, Paul's phone died, did you identify when it was plugged in?
I did, sir.
All right. And can you just tell the jury on those two, when the phone died each of those times and when it was plugged back in, please?
Sure. So it is logged that on June the 3rd at 12:30:27 p.m., the phone died, the battery went dead, and at 12:34:03, it had power again. It was reconnected.
And I'm going to take that from you. And at this time, state would move to enter exhibit 530 into evidence.
Submitted.
Should read it now.
Can you see anything on your screen up there? Oh, here it comes. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so can you zoom in a little bit? There we go. All right, so on June 3rd of 2021, what time did Paul's phone die?
On the 3rd, 12:30:27.
All right, what time is it plugged in?
12:34:03.
About 4 minutes later,
Yes,
correct?
sir.
A little less than 4 minutes, correct?
Yes.
June 5th, the first time, at what time did the phone die?
10:18:33.
All right, and what time was it plugged back in?
10:36:17.
So that would be roughly 17 minutes or
Yes,
so?
sir.
All right, and then June 5th, the second time, what time did it die?
21:23:29, excuse me, or 9:23 p.m.
Okay, and what time was it plugged back in?
21:30:21 or 9:30.
Okay, so roughly about 7 minutes later.
Yes, sir.
correct? All right, and you just didn't focus on when Paul's phone died in the data you reviewed, correct?
Correct.
Did you find in what you reviewed, did Paul frequently let his battery get low?
Yeah, he seemed to kind of fly close to the sun. The phone was always getting down to 1 or 2% before he plugged it in.
And would you say, in your opinion, from the data reviewed, the majority of the time he let it get that low, would he ultimately get it plugged in before it died?
Yes, sir.
Except during that week for those specific occasions, correct?
Correct.
All right. All right. And one other thing you were asked to look at on Paul's phone were the times when his screen came on, correct?
Yes.
And when it came off, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's sometimes referred to as the backlight on a phone, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you're specifically asked to look at the time on Paul's phone starting at about 8:49 p.m. on the night of June 7th, correct?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to show you it's been marked as States 529. Take a look at that. And what do you recognize that, sir?
Yes, I created this.
All right. And what is that?
It shows the backlight for the phone when it's kind of going on and off throughout that night.
For what time period?
From the period of 8:49 and then the final time of 10:34.
Okay. At this time, state would move to enter exhibit 529 into evidence.
No objection. Submitted.
And let's before we talk about this specific data, let's just the jury's here heard some testimony on this screen backlight and the screen coming on. Under what conditions, generally speaking, will a cell phone screen come on?
There's a lot of conditions that'll cause a cell phone screen to come on. If you pick up your phone, that can have the screen turn on. If you get a message or an alert from an app that you have, that can cause the screen to turn on. If the phone senses motion in a particular way, it'll turn on. There's a whole variety of ways that the backlight will
I
activate.
think you may have mentioned this, but the screen can be tapped.
Yes, yeah, you can simply tap your screen and that will cause it to turn on as well.
And so just to in a nutshell, the screen can come on for sometimes there's no human interaction, correct?
Correct.
But it also can be turned on by human interaction.
Yes,
correct?
sir.
let's look at the information on your report real quick. All right. Okay, so at 8:49 p.m., looks like the screen goes off, correct?
Correct.
On Paul's phone. And what time does it get, the next time that screen lights up?
The next screen on is at 10:18:08 p.m.
Okay. And in your review of Paul's phone, did you determine during that same time frame, starting at 8:49, was Paul's phone locked or unlocked?
It was locked.
Okay, so it was locked and the screen was off between 8:49 and 10:18.
Yes.
And then at 10:18:08, we see the screen come on, correct?
Yes, it appears to come on for 12 seconds to 10:18:20.
Okay. And then the screen goes back off starting at what time?
10:18:20
Okay, and then it comes back on.
at 10:20:08.
All right, and how long does it come on at 10:20:08?
It goes until 10:20:20, so 12 seconds.
Seconds? All right, and then what happens with his screen?
It goes back off at 10:20:20.
Okay, and it stays off until when?
10:34:16.
And is that the time Paul's phone died?
Yes,
All right, and so the screen may have come on briefly as the phone was
it
shutting
looks
off.
like for 4 seconds.
Okay, all right. In your review of Paul's phone, did you identify some of the communications that came into his phone?
Yes, I did.
And did you identify the last text that was sent to Paul's phone?
Yes,
And do you recall who sent that text?
Rogan.
And you may not remember this exactly, but well, first of all, was that do you recall contents of that very last text from Rogan?
Yes, it just says yo.
All right. And did this jury's heard testimony that cell phones will log when someone actually reads a text.
They
correct?
do.
And did you responding to log that text yo was read?
It was not read.
Okay. And do you recall roughly the time that text hit Paul's phone?
I don't off the top of my head.
All right. Was it between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock p.m.?
Yes,
Roughly speaking? Okay. But that was the last text. No other text came to his phone after that text from Rogan that said yo.
correct.
And in your opinion, if anybody had been looking at that screen that came on at either 10:18:08 or 10:20:08, would they have seen a notification on that screen?
Most likely, yes. You can set your phone to not show contents, or sometimes if you have a text that comes through, it'll show the whole text and the contact. It depends on how it's setting, but yes, typically, if you were to see the home screen of the phone, there would be the notification.
And so, depending on the settings, there's a good chance if anybody happened to be looking at that phone screen either of those times, they would have seen a text notification from Rogan Gibson, correct?
Yes,
And you just testified, we don't know exactly why the screen came on at that time, correct?
we do not.
All right, it could have been somebody tapped it, correct?
Yes,
Somebody may have briefly picked up the phone, correct?
yes,
It could have been any number of things, correct?
yes, any number of things.
And you can't tell us exactly why. though.
I cannot.
Now, this jury's heard a good bit of testimony about phone orientation changes, and we'll talk a little more about that in a minute. But in your opinion, is it possible for someone to just briefly pick up a phone, see the screen come on, put it back down, and for the phone not to record an orientation change?
Sure.
Okay, moving on. All right, and you're also asked to look at Maggie's phone, correct?
Yes, sir.
And specifically, what database were you asked to take a look at on Maggie's phone?
Knowledge C.
All right, the jury's heard some testimony on the Knowledge C database, but just please refresh our memories what that is and what kind of information is contained in a Knowledge C database on an iPhone.
Sure. So the Knowledge C database is something that Apple uses in the background to kind of track things that you're doing. It tracks your battery level, it tracks when you plug your phone in and when you unplug it, a whole bunch of stuff that is going on in the background that typically people have no idea is even running.
Okay. Okay. All sorts of information in that.
All sorts of information.
Would some folks be surprised if they saw the amount of information a phone was reporting in any given
It can
phone?
hold millions of artifacts.
I'll show you State's Exhibit 528 and ask if you recognize that, sir.
Yes, sir.
Have you reviewed the contents of that CD?
I have, it's a digital copy of some timeline reports.
Okay.
From Maggie's phone.
And specifically from Maggie's phone?
Yes, sir.
All right, and that timeline report would be from the Knowledge C database?
Yes, sir.
And specifically, you said that the Knowledge C database can contain millions of artifacts, correct?
Yes.
When you prepared that timeline, did you kind of narrow it down a little bit? to
Yes, I
focus,
did.
And roughly what times
Uh,
on that?
I believe from 8 to past 10.
All right. And at this time, state would move to enter Exhibit 528 into evidence.
No objection. Submit it.
Can I have the computer, please? Okay, I'm going to pull up this spreadsheet on the computer that's in evidence on the CD. Even with a fairly narrow time frame, there's still a voluminous amount of data contained in this database. Is that correct?
Lots of data. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, and specifically, let's take it to start time and end time. For this particular report, you kind of limited between time. What's that start time? That first
2053 to 8:53 p.m.
Okay. And we'll scroll down to the bottom real quick. And it looks like it stops at what time?
2108 to 908.
9:08 p.m.
Yes,
On
sir.
what date?
That would be June 7th, 2021.
All right. And there's just a whole bunch of stuff here, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, let's take a look at a couple things specifically. Excuse me, starting at 2053, we see some orientation changes, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And in your opinion, when you see an orientation change on that phone reported in the Knowledge C database, what does that information tell you?
Typically, that's somebody's handling the phone.
So while a screen coming on or off may not necessarily tell you somebody's handling the phone, the orientation change definitely does, correct?
Yes, it's the phone logging that it's going from either vertical or landscape to the other.
Okay. All right, so let's look at line 1149 starting down to about 1154. You see what I'm talking about there?
Yes, sir.
These lines here, and it says camera. What, in your review of this information, can you draw any conclusions about what's going on, why that camera pops up at about 8:54 in this database?
All I can say is that the phone is interacting with the camera in some way.
All right. Did it interact for a significant period of time?
No, sir.
Do you recall roughly how long the interaction took place?
I believe it's 1 second.
Okay. All right. Let's go down to line 1210. This is at 8:55 or 20:55. And we see some things. It says iOS snapshots.
Yes, sir.
And there's looks like it says something about Facebook to the far right there, correct?
Correct.
What, in your opinion, what's going on with the phone at this point?
So a snapshot or an iOS snapshot is something that your phone does when you minimize an app in the background. So if you close Facebook and put it kind of in the background, it takes a little snapshot of it. So when you pull it up, you can see what it is. It'll do this for, as we see here, Facebook, which we can pull up and see, does this for a bunch of apps. Not all apps take a picture of it. Some things will just be a blank screen. For example, if you do your camera, it's not going to store a picture of what your camera was looking at. When you have it, it's just a black screen.
Okay. And so it does, in your opinion, does this mean anybody's actually accessing the Facebook app or actually physically taking snapshots on this phone?
No.
All right. In fact, it's not doing that, correct?
Correct.
All right. In fact, in your view, the time frame on this report's 8:53 to approximately 9:08 p.m., correct?
Yes.
And during that time, in your review, was Maggie's phone locked or unlocked?
That was locked.
And it remained locked starting at what time?
It's,
You may have to draw your memory because this doesn't start till 8:53, but it's prior to 8:53, correct?
yes,
All right, and it remains locked until the next day, correct?
yes.
Um, All right, and then we're going to scroll down, starting at line 1243. I see a whole bunch of stuff here. And just generally speaking, what is all this stuff in this database at this time?
It's just background processes that your phone's running.
And I think we already skipped by it, so I'm just going to ask you real quick. But in this this time frame, we also see looks like the Siri app pop up in the NOC database.
Yes.
Correct? And how can the Siri app be triggered? In what
It
way?
could be a background process that's going on, or it could be triggered by somebody holding the power button or interacting with Siri.
Okay. All right, and we're almost done here. I'll be done by then.
Okay.
Okay. Well, the information is in this log, but did you identify a time after 9 o'clock when Maggie's screen turned off?
When her screen turned off,
Yes.
yes,
And was that at 9:07 p.m.?
yes,
Okay. And after 9:07 p.m., did you identify at any point over the next few minutes or over the next 20 minutes that Maggie's screen turned on?
I believe it turned back on at 9:31.
Okay. So between 9:07 and 9:31, Maggie's screen is off, correct?
Yes,
All right. And it also, you just said this a minute ago, it's also locked during that time, correct?
yes,
All right. And so if Maggie's phone were thrown between 9:07 and 9:31, when the screen's off and the phone is locked, in your opinion, would you see an orientation change?
no, sir. That version of iOS that she has on her phone did not log that at that particular time.
So that version, which was what at that time?
14.6.
All right. And that version of iOS, if a screen's off and a phone's locked, the phone's not going to record an orientation change.
That is correct.
Okay. No further questions, John. All right.
We're going to adjourn for the day, ladies and gentlemen, and resume at 9:30 to tomorrow morning. But everyone will stay in place until the jury leaves. With regard to the court's earlier ruling excluding not allowing the roadside shooting incident during cross-examination, I find that the defense opened the door to all of that testimony by questioning the witness as to the relationship between Mr. Murdaugh and Eddie Smith, payment of money to buy drugs, indebtedness, his overall relationship, and in order to not mislead the jury and to, under the doctrine of completeness and fairness, the court reverses its decision and will allow examination of witnesses regarding that relationship. And we'll be in recess till tomorrow morning, 9:30.